Welcome to Ember Igniters Podcast, the podcast that sets your soul ablaze. I'm Jenna Wilmers, here with my co-host Fran Malfer, and today we have a very, very special guest, a longtime friend of mine, Kara Cole.
Hi, ladies.
Yeah,
Hi.
it's
Good
so
morning.
good to have
Good
you.
morning.
So our theme for March is resilience. And Kara, I've known you for a long time, and you have such an incredible, incredible story of overcoming resilience over and over again. And we just thought it would be a great idea to bring her on here to share a little bit of that story to kind of show you that there is hope.
Absolutely.
And we just want you to know that you might have a little passion inside of you, and if you just keep following it, you too will be able to achieve it and overcome adversity. So
I had the pleasure just very recently, Kara?
Yeah.
Where you told your story to me, and it was when when Jenna first said, hey, I have a person I think would be awesome on the podcast. I always trust her, but when I heard your story, I certainly did understand that our audience needs to hear from you, specifically because many of us endure hardships in our lives. Mm-hmm. And we think we're the only one, or we think there's no way out of it. And you're a testimony, a huge testimony to what God can do in the midst of what feels like crisis.
Yeah.
So I'd love it if you just decide where you'd like to start in your story and just kind of tell us a little bit about the journey that you've been on recently.
Sure. So I grew up in a home with a mom and a dad. They were married. They're still married today. They are all lovey and affectionate with each other all of a sudden, which is beautiful to see. It's beautiful to see. You know, they had their share of challenges, and it's been great to see that they've stayed committed and connected and in love. And I grew up with two sisters, and grew up in the church. My mother was a worship leader and an organist for a lot of years, and so I grew up knowing about God and knowing who He was, but not really having a relationship with Him. High school, we went to I don't even remember what it was called, the youth conference. You come back all super on fire for Jesus, and really it's are you or are you just on fire because you hung out with your friends all weekend and nobody told you what to do? So
and eat candy
and stay up late and sing songs and mosh pit, jump around. So it was exciting, but again, still just not really sure that I knew what a relationship with Jesus looked like. And around high school, I started really seeking out relationships with boys to fill that hole. And I had a great dad. He was present. He was around. He was my person in the house, the person I got along with the most. But for whatever reason, I still was seeking out attention from boys to make me feel better about myself. And so that started really young. I was 14, I think, the first time I had what I thought was a serious boyfriend. And unfortunately, that led to things that I didn't consent to, that I wasn't happy about, that I had to deal with later. I had a manager at my job who took me to Planned Parenthood and taught me about birth control, and just kind of walked me through the process of, that was the first time I took a Plan B option for family planning, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was 14 years old, I look at my daughter now who's 14 and I'm like, wow. Oh my God. How did I handle that at her age? That's crazy.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So go back to high school, right?
Yeah.
So in high school, I mean, you were considered one of the cool kids, the popular kids and stuff like that. And the reason I want to draw attention to that is because even though you might be in the cool, popular crowd, you still struggle too. You're still a person. And I think that our society kind of puts those people on a pedestal almost, and because they want to be like you so badly.
The most likely to succeed.
Yes.
I was actually just thinking that very thing,
those class elections. Most popular. And what's crazy is in high school, I did not feel like one of those kids.
At all?
At all.
Wow.
At all. So I was a transplant kid. I was raised in Lansing and was brought into a really small community around middle school. And I tried very, very hard to be a part of that cool crowd and that the kids who, like, they were into sports and they got good grades and they partied on the weekends and, you know, they went to cottages and, like, I had the friends, but internally I never felt like one of them. I always kind of felt like the outsider or the one who didn't really understand, and I didn't grow up with them. So they had all these stories and this history that I didn't share.
Absolutely.
And I developed physically at a really young age. So I came into high school very curvy. Yeah. We'll keep it PG. Yeah. I was very curvy. And so attention from the boys was easy because I had this pretty face and I had these big boobs and I was just like, and I was decent at sports and I was very smart. I got good grades. So it was easy to blend in and look like one of them. But internally, I really struggled. I never really felt like I was one of the girls, that's for sure. Yeah. So I ended up becoming friends with boys because it was easier. Like, there was less drama. There was no, like, oh, she's stealing my boyfriend. Like, none of that. Like, it was just, like, I could just be myself. And I was a bit of a tomboy. Even though I was, like, on the outside, I cheered and I played volleyball and I figure skated. I did girly things, but really, I liked to fish and I liked to climb trees and I liked to get dirty and I liked to be in the barn. So it was like, I was kind of both. But with the boys, it was just easier to just be myself, or so I thought, which really ended up always resulting in sexual attention. So it was like, here I thought I had these friends, but really their intentions were not what my intentions were.
Sure.
So that lasted for a long time. I dated a lot through high school, had way too many relationships, way too many spiritual connections, way too many soul ties. And with each, like, notch on the belt, it was like I'm less of myself. And I felt less worthy and I felt more like a screw up. And it was like, well, if I'm going to be a screw up, I might as well just be a screw up all the way. Like, why keep count at this point? You know, it's like you just, that whole message of the gospel of forgiveness and grace and being washed clean just wasn't sinking in for me. It was like I would hear it. I would go to Sunday school, or I would go to youth group, or I would go to all these things. And I would hear it. I would hear the truth. And I had a Bible. And my mom was very devout, very committed to her relationship with God. And so I just wasn't getting it. Like, I was like, I just don't feel anything. And the only time I did feel something is when I was in a relationship. So things transpired. I graduated high school a little bit early, actually, and then went to cos school and had a hair license. And then one of my best friends from high school and I kind of jokingly one night, you know, we were partying and being so stupid as young people. And we had been sitting around one night. It was very late. Some kid shows up with a crotch rocket and I was like, I want one of those. And my best friend, who was a boy who had always had a crush on me, was like, I'll buy you one if you marry me. So we did. That was the genius idea. And our theory was we weren't necessarily in love, but everybody who had been in love in our lives was going through these really traumatic experiences and separations and divorces, and with the exception of my parents, but even them, you know, there was challenges in their marriage as well. So it was like, you know, everybody who marries for love is dumb. We're just going to be best friends forever.
So I have a question for you. I too was raised in a Christian home. And I think I'm curious as to what it is about having had the home life that you just described, which sounds I'm sure to many of you in our audience like, well, that sounds really cool. I didn't have that. I would like that, you know. But there's something about the uniqueness of every individual. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about where in you were you seeking something that you didn't find in the home life that you had? Can you identify that?
You know, that's a good question. I just remember feeling invaluable. Like, I just remember feeling like nothing I did would ever be good enough or it mattered enough. and it didn't make me the type of person that someone would want in a long-term situation. Like, I knew at that point that, I was starting to disconnect from my parents at a really young age, honestly. I mean, I was pretty independent around 14, 15. I was running my own schedule, and I turned 16, I had a car. So like, I was really removed, and partially I think on my own. I think some of it was shame, because at 14 and 15 I had already done things that I knew my parents wouldn't be proud of.
I see.
And so I started pulling away, just like, I don't belong here either. Like, I'm not good enough to belong here. And the standards were high. I mean, my parents were really strict, and they were intentional about the way that they raised us and the things that they poured into us, and they did their best to protect us from things that they wouldn't want their children to be a part of. And so the fact that I had turned out that way anyways, despite all of their best efforts to raise this like really good girl, I was like, oh gosh, like, they're never, if they only knew what I had already done.
Well, we also lived in a college town too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we were kind of exposed to things at a young age that we normally wouldn't have been at that age. I mean, our school had a program where you could actually go to college and high school at the same time.
Oh.
And so by the time you graduated, like I was a sophomore in high school, or sophomore in college. When I graduated. So we had even those exposures as well. So, and really pressures too, because, you want to fit in. You want to feel that feeling of freedom, because you're kind of like, you've lived your whole life in this small town where parents were very strict and very like, hey, this is how we do things. And so when you have your freedom, you kind of take it and run with it, unfortunately. So it's just,
and there was a lot of crossover. Like, we did my jobs, a lot of the college kids were there. Like, all of my friends were definitely older. As a freshman in high school, I think the majority of the people that I was hanging out with were seniors. And then by the time that I got into being an upperclassman, all of my friends were in college. So we were,
It's an interesting thing, because I too had a phase in my life where all I wanted to know was, do I believe what I believe because my parents told me to believe that?
Yes.
Or who am I in this whole sort of realm? So when you talk about that, I think people out there can identify with the fact that we're all kind of searching for who we are, where do we fit, and your story continues with what that took for you, right?
Yeah. So I got married really young. The first time I was a baby. I was 18. And I had no idea what I was signing up for, right? Like, marriage is hard in general. And it is, it's about becoming one person, two people becoming one person. Yeah. And that part never really happened. There were multiple marriages, but it was just kind of this, like, I'm going to live my life, you're going to live your life, and we're going to do it next to each other, living in the same house. We took no time to assess, like, did we have the same goals? Did we have the same beliefs? Did we have the same moral values? Did we want kids? Like, there was no real pause. And our families did their best to warn us, to slow us down. Like, at one point my grandma even like took me in the basement by the hands and was like, please don't do this.
As a grandparent,
yeah,
I know
right?
what that can feel like.
Yeah, it was like, it was actually the first time my grandmother really like spoke sternly to me that I remember in my lifetime. So there were several warnings, and people tried to tell us, but we were very headstrong. So we did it anyways, and slowly the relationship just really turned quite abusive. We experienced a lot of outbursts, a lot of physical abuse, a lot of trauma. Honestly, we lived on a military base, which was a whole nother culture within itself. And I had really been. If we back up to high school, I went to catechism around that time.
Yes.
And was told some things that really were abrasive to me as a young girl who had already had sex, who had already dealt with abortion or pre-abortion type medications. And I just was not aware of the judgment that would happen within the church until that moment. And it was kind of like, it wasn't directed at me. They had no way of knowing. I hadn't told anyone, even my parents at that point. But the statement I was given was that that babies don't go to heaven because they are not able to ask for their sins to be covered by Jesus' blood on their own. So you have to be able to voice that. And I was just disgusted and scared and guilty and all of these things, right? Like, I was just like, what did I do? I sent this baby to hell, and I didn't even really all the way know what that meant.
Messaging is such an important thing, because depending on how you hear something, right? So it's a lot of how you process and hear things. Not that perhaps they intended for you to have that shame and that guilt and all those things, but messaging and how they say it, because God loves every innocent child.
Yes.
Right.
And being aware of who we're giving the message to. It's just...
Yeah, know your audience for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure that sounded good in your head.
Yeah.
In a room full of perfect people who've not made any mistakes, but like, we're all broken.
That's
we're all
exactly right.
hurting. We've all been through trauma of some sort, and church is really meant to be a hospital. It's meant to be a place where you can come and heal. And when you're hearing things like that, when you're hearing like, oh, I'm excluded because... Yeah. And that's what I heard, was basically I'm not welcome here because I've already sent a baby to hell, and I am probably going to hell too. Like, this is just not for me. And I ran in the other direction, just completely refused to go to church. So now fast forward to living on a military base and being in a relationship that was causing so much pain. I found a very small group of people who were gathering in a church singing worship songs. They were my age. It was a very hodgepodge group of people, and I started hiding there. I started just not going home, like anything to go back to the trauma and the abuse. And so it was a place where I found healing and I found God, but I hadn't really even recognized that that's who I had found. In my mind, it was like all these people who were healing me. And the relationship transpired. I ended up conceiving a child, had been on several different methods of birth control and had no idea I was pregnant. Around Christmas, finally took a pregnancy test, and I was about 6 months along.
Wow.
And there had been a lot of, like, people always say, like, how did you not know? Like, I had gained a ton of weight. I was miserable and depressed. I really was not. I was in my body, but I wasn't really in my body. So I just wasn't aware of anything that was going on. All of the changes, I just felt sick all the time, and I thought it was because I was so depressed. So ended up being pregnant, moved home before the baby arrived, and moved in with my parents again, which I think every young person does at one point or another. I was 21 at the time. And so I was just this young person who was kind of lost, about to have a baby, and had no idea what I was going to do. Scared out of my mind, like, I'm gonna ruin this child. I shouldn't be anybody's parents. And had him, and it was just this very out of body experience, like raising him at such a young age and knowing that he was my responsibility. But really, my village stepped in. My mom kind of took over for the first couple months, and taught me how to be a physical mom. And then I moved out for a little while on my own, and eventually moved in with my grandparents to get a better job, closer to the city. And then my grandma kind of stepped in and, taught me how to be this more like sensitive, emotional. So I learned like how to physically take care of a child. Now I'm learning how to emotionally take care of a child, but still trying to figure out who the heck I am.
How hard was that to you kind of have to reboot your mind at that point in time, like, because you have to think differently. How hard was that? Kind of explain that process a little.
I think I had learned this ability throughout my growing up and throughout my making all of these things that I thought were mistakes that were just going to completely condemn me. I had learned how to like compartmentalize my life. So mentally, I would live this span of my life, make all of these mistakes, close the door, start a new chapter, and completely forget. Like, put it all the way out of my mind. I'm just not going to think about this guy, or I'm not going to think about this situation. I'm going to move on and pretend like I'm somebody new. And so I had already kind of trained myself to start leaving pieces of myself in the past. Yeah. And so at this point, starting, like, I almost in my mind was like, I haven't really been married. Like, I really was like, did that actually happen? And throughout my life, it was really interesting because the marriage was so short that other people would be like, oh, that doesn't really count. So it was like validating to me, like,
Sure,
it's okay to close that door and start a new chapter. And we kind of say that, I feel like, about a lot of things in life, which leads to us not dealing with the trauma and not dealing with all of the broken pieces. We just kind of leave them broken and move on and create a new project. Like, so I really was operating as a new person. Like, I can define chunks of my life by who I felt I was in that space and time. And so I, like the single mom, kind of wholesome, the rule was you have to go to church if you live at grandma and grandpa's. So I went to church.
Those darn grandma and grandpa.
Right, yeah, right. And I worked at a downtown, like, really edgy salon. So I was, like, living this, like, totally parallel life, but totally different. You know, like, I'd go to work in, like, fishnets and a men's button-down and then come home and put on a dress and go to church. Like, you know, be a mom over here, but, like, still maintain my youth over here. And got into a lot more trouble. Just went down a path of, like, real destruction, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, anything that would numb what I was feeling inside of myself that I didn't like.
So would you say that along with having to do what Jenna was just talking about, you know, sort of reframing, rebooting your mind and thinking differently, did you also come to a place, or did you come to a place at some point where you recognized that it was your choices that you were making and that was what was really providing sort of the impetus to where you were going from there forward?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There were so many times I would stand in the mirror and stare at myself and say, what is wrong with you? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like, I just could not. There were definitely times I even looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize myself. Like, and I would say horrible things. Horrible. Like, you're so stupid.
Yeah, do you play that negative self-talk?
Totally.
Like we all
totally.
do.
Yeah, you're so ugly. What's wrong with you? You know, the only reason God made you pretty, and now it's just bringing all this bad attention. And, like, I would wish to be ugly. I would wish that boys would stop looking at me, or that my attempts to gain attention from them wouldn't work. Or I said horrible things to myself. And that honestly didn't stop until probably the last 5 years. That went on well into my adulthood.
It's a huge struggle for many of us. We've talked about it before in our podcast, where our minds are this place where things sort of replay themselves like a soundtrack. So if you've had people say things to you, or you've had a belief system about yourself, which I think, Kara, you're talking a little bit about. Yeah. You had this belief system about yourself. So what did you do? You just kept enforcing it by speaking that to yourself over and over again. So I appreciate that you share that, because I think our listeners and our watchers, you know, they can identify with you know, feeling like I'm not the greatest mom in the world, you know, I don't have the best job, I'm no good at anything. So you've really identified what a lot of us have struggled with in our lives. So thank you for that. But I'm curious too then. So you said just within the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So there's hope, people.
There's hope. There's hope. There's been so many, I felt like I was on this merry-go-round. That I was just living this cycle of, like, find yourself, gain some footing, meet a guy, get in a relationship you have no business being in, and then this cycle of abuse that would follow, because it wasn't, I don't think, innately, I mean, they weren't, like, terrible humans that I was, like, partnering myself with. I think there's definitely something to be said for being in a relationship that God doesn't have for you. And it doesn't work for a reason. Yeah. Because it's not who you're supposed to be with. Yeah. And there's something to be said for being in relationships where you draw the worst out of people. And you speak to those broken places in them that...
Oh, that's so important. Say that again. I think I even need to hear that. It can be what we're pulling out of people.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And not to put responsibility on myself. Like, no one deserves any level of abuse. But I think when you're in a situation, and this could be a romantic relationship or not, where you're in relationship with someone who continues to use you or continues to treat you poorly or continues to break you down where you're already breaking. But then also your reaction to those moments pulls out even more brokenness out of them.
That's good.
And it just speaks to like really seeking God's wisdom and God's guidance when you're entering relationships, and friendships included. Like there are definitely times in my life where I've been friends with people who, and I would jokingly say they're sucking the life out of me. But like in reality, they were sucking the life out of me. Like, you know, I just, every time I was around them, it was just this feeling of like I couldn't give enough, I couldn't be enough, I couldn't do enough for them. And they're always asking me for something. So the relationship was never reciprocal. It was never like we're pouring into each other, supporting each other. It was hold me up, hold me up, hold me up, even if you're like laying on the ground and you can't give anymore. And that's what I experienced a lot in the romantic relationships as well. So I'm, you know, living single mom in the city. I was doing hair, working at a salon, and really successfully got picked up as an educator. So I'm experiencing all this success in my professional life.
I see.
While feeling like I am a crap mom. I am not worth being in a relationship with. I'm never going to find somebody to love me. And just that paradigm of like, 1 minute I'm the best and the next minute I'm the worst.
That's good, because how many of us walk around comparing ourselves to somebody, saying they have it all together?
Yeah.
Look at them. They're successful at their job, without knowing that inside they're breaking apart. They've got burdens in their lives. They really need what you're talking about, which is that place of where can you find the kinds of people, the kinds of things that will pour into you, draw out the goodness in you.
Yes.
So how did that kind of happen for you?
So, well, that didn't happen for a long time after that. Still, I was, I did start seeking out therapy. That was huge for me. It was not something I grew up with. I think one of my younger sisters may have, when we were younger, I don't remember exactly, but I personally had never been to a therapist until this phase in my life where I was a single mom. I was in my 20s. And my son was exhibiting all these signs of just struggling, anger issues and abandonment issues, and whether it was, you know, from either parent. At this point, he had both of his parents in his life, but I was gone all the time. So I was in his life and I was taking care of him, but I was working constantly because it had become so successful. So I started seeking out therapists, and I'm like, I ask every single therapist the same question: why? Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep making the same mistakes? Why do I keep ending up in relationships with the same type of person? I just feel like I am a magnet for broken people. And what I didn't realize then, that I realize now, is God brings people into our lives to pour into, to strengthen their relationship with Him. So all this time, when I should have been evangelizing and sharing the gospel, I was getting married and having babies. So I was helping them in my quote unquote, you know, like I'm the helper, I'm the fixer, I'm the, you know, I fix them up, make them better, and send them off on their way to meet the right one.
Own strength.
Yes, exactly.
Like to do.
Yes. So I entered another relationship, a serious one. This time I had met him in a church setting, which to me meant safe.
Sure.
So you go to church, you find Jesus.
That's right.
You meet a guy who's also found Jesus. We both find each other attractive. Like, this is going to work. And I'm thinking, like, he wasn't just in church. He was committed to church. He was serving in church. And I just felt like this is safe. Like, there's no way he's going to be someone that will, it's polar opposite, right? So I went from one extreme to the other. And that marriage struggled just as much. There was no physical abuse there, but that, the mental abuse, the mental gymnastics. And he was on a path of, how do I say, like, he was on a mental health journey of discovering where he needed support. And things went downhill very quickly. He lost his job.
It's hard for a
He
man.
was, he was in a state of just constant paranoia. So things progressed. We saw a psychiatrist. That didn't go well either. And it ended with a pretty significant domestic issue, which turned into a very long court case. The state ended up picking it up, even though I didn't want to press charges. So I was forced to go through this really traumatic trial where I had to testify against him twice because the first one was deemed a mistrial. And the whole time I'm going, please stop. Like, he needs help. He doesn't need correction. He doesn't need to be locked up. I'm not pressing charges. I don't want to do this. And all the time I'm still being forced to testify against him. And we did end up coming to a resolution. I believe there was some mental health assistance that was given, but it was a probationary kind of thing that he was able to graduate from, and he's doing very well now, and is a great dad. We did have a daughter together. So coming out of that relationship, now I'm like, okay, I'm twice over divorced. Like, I'm ruined. I'm done. There's no place for me in church. There's no place for me in the family of Christ. Like, I just don't belong here. No matter how hard I try, I'm never gonna be good. And so I just started living however I felt like living.
Yeah.
Like, I completely gave up. Back to the drugs and alcohol, back to the partying, back to the scenarios where people told me I was pretty and I felt like I deserved to be in the room because they were all screwed up just like me.
How was your family during that time? Like, and like your circle, like, were they again trying with these like conversations of like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? Trying to help, sort of thing?
My family, I think, was mourning. I don't want to say they had given up on me, but they had figured out long before that no matter how much warning and correction they were going to give me, I was going to do what I wanted to do anyways. And I think they got tired. They got tired of trying to reach out and trying to correct and trying to help and trying to support. And they did a phenomenal job continuing to support my kids through that time because I was a terrible mother. I was completely selfish, just not at all taking into consideration how this was affecting them. Because in my mind, like, they're young. Like, I had a baby and a 6-year-old, and it was like, they're never going to notice. They're never going to know who I really am, at least not right now. And so I was intelligent enough and cared enough to make sure that they were left with people that loved them and would care well for them. But it wasn't me, unfortunately. And there were many, what I would call interventions. Many moments of like, hey, we've had enough. We can't do this anymore. We can't sit by and watch you self-destruct.
Right.
And I had a couple really good friends at church that I had, when I was at church with my grandparents, that kind of latched onto me and never really let go. And I would get angry, right, when they would sit me down and say, hey, we're not okay. We're not okay with what you're doing. And I would be like, well, screw you. Like, you're not really my friend then, which was totally not true. I value those friendships very much today. But it just wasn't, I wasn't in a place where I could hear them. I was just... like, if you knew everything, you wouldn't say this to me. You wouldn't care this much. You wouldn't try this hard because I'm a lost cause.
When I listen to your story, one of the things that I personally also know this from my own story is that what we were talking about, these soundtracks or these thoughts that constantly plague us, they become... in many ways, they become the friend, the very friend that we don't need to have.
Yes.
And so in our ministry, we talk sometimes about what kind of fire do you have in your life? Well, there are wildfires that we can, that start up in our lives that just kind of keep us going into this, hopping from one bush to another and just spreading and spreading in our lives. And yet I can hear that there was this thread constantly in your life, regardless of these thoughts and actions, because we are talking about the decisions that you made.
Yeah.
And yet I can't wait for you all to really hear what the Lord has done in Kara's life. But I appreciate the honesty of what you're doing by saying, this is what I felt. This is exactly who I thought I was. And I said to myself, well, if that's it, then this is where I'm going.
Yeah.
That was the path.
What gave you that, what we call relentless courage? I mean, so far, and still more to come, you keep picking yourself up. You keep dusting yourself off and taking another step where other people would be on the floor saying, I'm done. Take me now, Lord. It's over. Like,
oh, there were definite.
You just kept going.
There were definite moments of like, I know that I swallowed too many pills, or I know that I got behind that wheel way too drunk and woke up the next day like, who drove me home? And they're like, you did. God really protected me. And at the time, I couldn't tell you why. I think there were definitely things that I was doing on purpose to hurt myself, kind of hoping that things would just end, kind of hoping that I wouldn't have to try anymore.
Sure.
And I never escalated to the level of what I would say like true physical self-harm. I was never like within minutes of dying. But I was on a path where I thought, oh, maybe this is the day. Maybe this is the day that'll just all be too much, and like I'll get hit by a drunk driver myself, or I'll just run my car off the road, or those mom moments when, you know, like everything is weighing on you and swirling in your mind, and all of a sudden I've driven to somewhere I didn't even mean to drive to. Like I wouldn't even have to necessarily be under the influence of something. I was under the influence of Satan.
Amen.
And I heard recently we were talking in discussion with some leaders, and that Satan can only use what he hears, what you give him.
And deception,
yes. He's not prophetic. He doesn't have the Holy Spirit. He can't read into us, but he can use what we give him, what we speak out of our mouths.
That's right.
And so I had stood in that mirror, and I had spoken every fear, every disgusting thought, everything that I hated about myself. I had spoken it out loud to myself. So he had that information, and he would just swirl it around and around and around. And I would catch myself just hating myself. And then at the same time, being able to look at my kids. And I would say of everything, the thing that drove me the most that I was aware of was my children. And as much as I felt like, oh my gosh, how did I get pregnant again? Like there are so many of them, and I just like no level of birth control was working. But honestly, I think it was also part of God's protection for me, because he was like, oh, you think this kid is able to take care of himself? I'm going to give you another one to take care of, because it's the only thing keeping you going. And so when people say, oh, my kids are blessings, like literally my kids kept me alive. And when everybody else would be like, hey, you do know how babies are made, right? Like, you really think it's time to slow down? Right. Maybe stop. It was definitely not intentional on my part, but I truly believe it was intentional on God's part. And so with 2 kiddos, I'm twice over divorced. I'm living this crazy pattern of life, was downtown living in an artist's loft, just really like priding myself that I was exposing my kids to all this culture. And like at the same time using it as an excuse to be in the middle of everything that was feeding all of my addictions. And so I was just lying to myself. And
well, Satan was helping you.
Yeah. But believing the lies. Believing the lies that Satan.
That's an important aspect. Yeah.
And buying into them. And so I met another guy. We connected really well. We were in the same industry. Things seemed to be going down the right path. And I saw this vision of like success. Like, okay, he's really passionate about his profession. I'm really passionate about my profession. We're both educated. We're both smart. Like, we could do this. We could really change the face of the hair industry in this city. And we had all these dreams, like as a dating couple, of like what that would look like. And then as the relationship transpired and more babies came, and we decided to start finding a way to live right. It was a conviction we both had, and went through some premarital counseling, saw a counselor for about a year, decided to get married, joined a church, and I was like, okay, like finally starting to feel like, okay, like I'm on the train tracks now, like this is gonna work. And then somewhere along the way, all of the things that I had chosen to ignore, all of the red flags, all of the yellow flags, all of those little moments of like, are you sure you want to do this again? That I had ignored on purpose, because I was just so focused on having a family for my kids, having a partner for my life, having a partner for my business. And all of these goals that I had, I was like jamming this square person into my round life. Like it is so true, that square peg, round hole thing. And like, I just was completely forcing it. And we were both miserable. We were both lost. Not too long into the marriage, now we've got 5.5 kids in the house. We learned that he had another child, so we've now got 6 in the mix. And we're living in this tiny apartment, and we're trying to make things work, and he decides he's no longer a Christian.
Wow.
That's devastating.
Devastating.
Yeah.
Because when you have that thing in common, then all the other things you can, say to yourself, we can work this out because God is there.
Yeah.
But when you lose that, what's your footing?
Yes.
Right.
And that's where my brain was completely. Literally, you could have taken the words right out of my mouth. Like, I thought it was no different than if he came home and said, I'm no longer a man, I'm going to be a woman now.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that was the level of, like, if I could put this on a scale of perspective, that was the level of, like, shaking. And then to also hear that what he was finding his truth in was so against what I knew to be true. So the marriage already wasn't healthy, but that just completely shoved it over a cliff. There were definite times of abuse. There were definite times of isolation, of abandonment. There were times that I would like sit on the floor in the closet and cry and not come out for a day. And things they were not going well. Inside the house was all of this turmoil, but outside the house, we looked together.
Good.
We were a cute couple. We had cute babies. Everywhere we went, people were like, oh, it's that really cute couple. They both do hair. Look at them. And it was like, oh my gosh, like, why can't we just be this family that everybody else sees? And it was killing our kids. It was killing us, just trying to force it.
You mentioned something there that Fran and I have experienced that we call it the chameleon. So you blend into your surroundings. So like as soon as you go out into the world, you're now blending into that, and you're blending into be the life of the party. You're blending into be this Christian, and we kind of just keep doing that in our lives until we're actually fine with being our authentic selves.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, for a lot of us, that takes a long time. And so for you to kind of say that, it's kind of like, oh man, like I wonder how many other people in like our audience would resonate with that, because so often the chameleon comes because it's almost a part of acceptance and what we're trying to achieve, because we want to be accepted, we want to be loved, and so it just kind of comes that way, unfortunately, and it could be positive or negative attention with it.
What's really interesting about, if you study anything about chameleons, that's exactly how they feel safe. Mm-hmm. It's what they do to be safe.
Yeah.
So if if they blend into their environment, then predators can't get to them, those kinds of things. So we all in some way do something similar to that, I think, in our life when we're trying to find our place.
Yes.
And that's it. So there's a part of you that had to have gone through, I need to see my future different. Mm-hmm. What can I see this as, and what will it take me to do that? So talk a little bit more about how you began to reimagine your future.
Yeah, I definitely, I experienced the chameleon thing as a kid. Like, I remember as a really mouthy, disrespectful teenager, like, hurling insults at my mother. Like, you're such a hypocrite. Yeah. And that one, like, stuck with me because my mother was so good at letting everybody think everything was okay, which I think stemmed from a place of fear and a place of wanting to be accepted, too, because she, too, had been transplanted to this new place and didn't fit and didn't belong. So for her, if us girls were doing anything out of line, it would reflect on her, which would then cause her to not be accepted in her new community of friends as well. So it was like, I remember as a kid, like, we have to go to church and we have to look perfect, and we put on the ruffly socks and we sit quiet in the row and we do all the perfect things, and then we go home and there's all of this dysfunction, which I think is like so many
Yes.
households,
Yes.
so many
Yes.
families. I think there's a level of protection and making sure that not your business isn't everybody's business.
Right.
And so where is the line between being transparent and honest with the people around you
Good question.
and maintaining protection over your household? Because not everybody is for you. Not everybody is going to pray for you. Not everybody is going to intercede for you and work towards that protecting. And so who's going to use this manipulatively and against you? And Satan and
Yes.
comes in, and so it's difficult. So I think the fallback, the safe option is trust no one,
Right.
which was the theme that I had learned my whole life, was trust no one. So I learned to be quiet. If I had visions for my future, they were in my head. If I had visions for my children, they were in my head. I wasn't speaking them out loud because I couldn't even trust the person I was married to at any point in my life, let alone anyone else. Because then it was like, either you're going to hold me to it, which I'm not ready for, or
That's always it.
or you're going to attack it and you're going to cause it to not work. So I just started to really be quiet. And I think also with maturity and age, and I really was trying to figure out where God was in all of this. At this point, and we were pretty attached to a church that was safe to be attached to. And I say that because it was this massive church. There were definitely loving people there. One pastor in particular was always intentional to check on us. But we could walk in the door, maybe see one or two people that we knew, hide in our usual section, and, live in this sea of, 1,500 people, and no one really sees us.
Yeah.
So it was safe. At some point throughout his transition into converting, I found a different church. A friend of mine had been begging me to come with her, and I just was really putting it off, just because we had been through so much change. It felt like we kept changing things, hoping that it would fix it, and it never did. We changed therapists, or we changed jobs, or we changed apartments, or we changed, with every little step. We had another baby. It was like, oh, this is going to be the thing. This is going to be the thing where things turn around. And we got kind of desperate at one point, and so I just was like, okay, fine. Let's go try this church.
Sure.
And we walked in. And I can still, within myself, see us walking into this church. And I was pushing, the baby was, brand new. And all my little kiddos, walking in. And we looked like this super cute little family. Fresh start, right, was what was in my head. And this church welcomed us like they knew us.
Oh, that's amazing.
And for me, that was a totally healing moment.
Yeah.
For my husband at the time, that was petrifying.
Oh, interesting, huh?
Because I think for him, he was walking this path that wasn't true to himself and wasn't true to what he believed, but he hadn't quite figured that out yet. So this ended up being the thing that really pushed him over the line to this isn't me. I don't want to go to a church like this, where I was like, oh my gosh, I found my people. I found my tribe.
I'm in the promised land.
Yes, literally. It was just so, everything that I had hoped for in a church, for my kids specifically. I wanted multicultural. All of my kids are multi-ethnic. And so I wanted multicultural. I wanted to walk in and see not everybody looks the same. Not everybody looks polished.
Right.
Not everybody looks like they've got it all together.
Right.
And there was people that from all walks of life. And you could tell, there was one person I vividly remember hugging, and they smelled like alcohol. And I was like, that's me. That's how many times did I go to church and hug someone and they smelled alcohol on me. And so it was initially this sigh of, I feel like I might be able to be myself here. We went a few more Sundays, which really drove home for my husband at the time. I don't want to be at a church like that. I'm no longer attending. And for me, it was I feel like I might die if I don't go. And so I kept going. I took the kids, and the church was growing. slowly they found out that I had a voice. And my whole childhood I sang. I stepped away in high school. I didn't sing much in high school. But when I was attending church with my grandparents, I ended up in a situation where I had suggested a song to the choir director because it resonated with me, and handed it to him, and he was like, "Oh, great, thanks." And he was like, "You should come to choir rehearsal." And I was like, "Oh, no.
I'm not good enough.
That's not for me.
There's that sound
I don't want to be in front of anybody."
Only perfect people are out there.
Yes.
The broken ones.
And somehow my friends convinced me to start going to choir rehearsal. And at one point, the choir director says, "Oh, we're making some changes to the schedule. We're going to sing this song first. And actually, we have a new person in our choir that's going to sing it."
Oh.
And I was like,
You're like, who is that going to be?
no. Immediately hot, sweating,
We've all been there.
Like, no, you have the wrong one. And we prepared, and I love to make people happy. It gives me joy to make other people happy. And so to stand up in front of a room of that many people and be like, "No, I'm not doing this," I would never. So I agree. I'm going to do this.
Look at you.
Yeah. What
So
most
you're
people would
kind
see
of
as
like
brave.
a reluctant thing. God says, go and sing and use your voice, and you're kind of like Moses going, no, please send somebody else.
Yes, only if you drag me and make me and force me.
Yeah.
And so we start practicing, and I'm like really resonating with this song. And we come up to the Sunday where we're supposed to sing it, and I get laryngitis.
No.
I have no voice. I am like a raspy whisper, and I come in and I'm crying and I'm so sorry. And we had several competent people to sing this song in the choir. I mean, it was a beautiful choir. And he says, "You know what? Just take a breath. It's okay. Go to the choir room. I want you to drink some tea. I'm going to come in. We're going to pray." He comes in and he prays for me, and like we go through dress rehearsal, someone else sings it, and we're lining up backstage, and he hands me the microphone, the lead microphone. And I was like, I looked at him like, "What are you doing?
Right.
What's wrong with you?" And he was like, "No, it's God was clear, it's yours." And we went out there, and I opened my mouth, and somebody else's voice came out of my body. And telling the
Praise
story,
the
it still
Lord.
gives me chills.
Yeah.
God completely used me. And
Beautiful.
we got off stage, and I had no voice. And I was just like, from that moment forward, and I had been like singing open mic nights, and I had done things musically. Music was my medicine. Like I didn't do it for money. I didn't want to be famous. I didn't really even want anyone to look at me or to know it was me that was singing. It was kind of for me.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I decided it wasn't for me. It was for God. And I would never sing again if I wasn't singing for him. And I didn't. I stuck to it, even in the moments of where I kind of turned away again and was back into the drugs and the alcohol. I didn't sing at all. And so coming back around to this new church, they find out that I have a voice. They put me on the praise team. I'm kind of just still trying to hide off to the side. And that doesn't work for very long. God continues to put me in the forefront. And I was really still very reluctant, but just felt like if these are my people, this is my role, right? This is where I can contribute. And so I kept singing. And over the course of the next year, we had gone through a couple of worship leaders, and we gathered for a rehearsal. We had been even using some YouTube tracks. Like, we were really like just being faithful and serving no matter what the situation was. And we gathered for a rehearsal, and my pastor says, "Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Meet your new worship leader, Kara." And I was like, again, like, how do I keep ending up in this position? Like, I am not educated for this. I didn't go to school for this. I've never even taken a vocal lesson. Like, I can't teach anybody anything. Like, I'm just here. Like,
Well, this is why we have Kara with us today, because Kara exhibits exactly the thing that we've been talking about, where God has given to every person.
yes.
I don't care where you are, what you're listening to right now. He's got something very special inside of you that he created when he thought about you. And we don't always know what it is. We go around life looking for it. And out of the blue, kind of, for Kara. It's going to be her voice. Maybe she thought it was going to be this profession that you've been doing all along.
Yeah.
So there you are now, a praise worship leader.
Yeah.
And don't you just love that she said, I didn't have any kind of education.
Yeah.
I wasn't trained for this. But when you match up to what God has for you, everything becomes clear and open, and new things are constantly available.
Yeah.
Well, God qualifies the called.
Yes.
He doesn't call the qualified.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
And my pastor kept saying that to me, right? Excuse me. He's got this like incredible relationship with God, and he hears very clearly, and he's very obedient in his calling, which trickles down through the rest of the church totally. But he kept saying that to me, like, Kara, it doesn't matter. And I would say to him, but you don't understand. Like, I feel ill-equipped. And he's like, he's going to equip you.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in our culture, we're so used to watching movies and watching TV shows where like this like magical moment happens and the life is just completely different from that point on. That's not how God works. I mean, he can.
Yes,
And there
exactly.
are moments where he does. But more times than not, it is, okay, I'm calling you to this. Are you going to be obedient? Are you going to say yes?
Thank you.
And then
Yeah.
I'm calling you to this. Are you going to be obedient? Are you going to say yes? And it's this step by step by step. And now, for me to look back, it's been 6 years, for me to look back at that first year and think, oh my gosh, if I had only known. And it feels like I blinked. It feels like God snapped his fingers and my life changed. But in reality, it's been 6 years. My baby's not a baby anymore. She's going to be 6 in April. And to watch the transformation in my own life, I did not get the fairy tale ending. My marriage did end up dissolving, and we got a divorce. And I hope and pray the best for all of my past situations, that they can be good fathers, that they can be good leaders in their kids' lives, and that we can be amicable and co-parent to the best of our ability, that we can make the best out of the mess, kind of a thing. I don't wish any of them ill by any means. But God, my fairy tale wasn't with them. My fairy tale wasn't marriage. My fairy tale is God finally creating space for me to figure out who I actually am and what that means for my role in this church family. Not church as in the church I'm attending, church as in humanity.
Yes, thank you.
And my role on this earth may not be to be the best wife. My role on this earth may be to be the best mom, to appreciate the blessings that I've been given, and to use my gifts in a way that affects others and that can heal and create space for God to enter into their lives also. Amen. So God is just, he's so good.
He is good.
He's so good. And he is just, he's continually growing this ministry that I'm a part of. And we went from 8 worship team members to, we now have a team of 38. And I am I'm allowed to be responsible for pouring into other worship leaders. We're creating space for worship leaders to come up and to do the role of leading the songs, so that I can now step back and do the role of leading this ministry. So
If you're comfortable,
Yeah.
I would like you to tell the audience the name of your church.
I attend Relevant Grand Rapids.
I can only say I love that. Jen and I have this little thing about how often I say that, but I do love that because she goes to a church called Relevant. Her life is relevant.
Yes.
God showed her how important she is to the kingdom of God, and that her gifts are going to be used in ways I believe are still unimagined.
Yeah.
And I love that you can also see that you have that same relevance in your life. You are not just born to be nothing. You're born to be something.
Amen.
And we haven't talked about it, but I think maybe you mentioned the word resilient or relentless courage. You have had this, sort of rubber band experience in and
Yes.
out. And that's a lot of being a resilient person, knowing how to move with the ups and the downs, because the truth of the matter is they are going to be ups and downs.
Yeah.
It isn't a fairy tale. Thank you for saying that, because it's not. And so thank
I
you.
also want to draw attention to the people that were surrounded you, because we were doing Bible study, and last week it kind of really resonated with me. God uses people to engage us through questions, to draw out the truth he already knows, to get us to say it out loud. And so how many times you kind of expressed like how your friend wanted you to go to church, or wanted you to say, no, you are worthy. You are, this is where you are supposed to be. And, we call that our God-given life assignment, and where we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to get there. And it's not always an easy journey.
Yeah.
And it's not all roses every time either. But those little small miracles, those baby steps, the baby steps are still steps forward. And I love your story. I think your story is amazing. And
I can't claim it. I didn't write it, but I do feel very passionate about being transparent about it and being open about it, because I do think there were so many times where I thought nobody would understand. Nobody, like I had known people who had been through like abusive relationships, or had been in situations of infidelity, or who had been in situations of abandonment. But in my mind, it was like, but they didn't really deserve it. I kind of deserved it. That was the mindset that I was in. Like, I kind of deserved all the bad things that happened to me because of all the poor choices I had made. And now, looking back and thinking, oh my gosh, God allowed me to experience all of those things.
That's right.
To be able to stand here today and say, like, it doesn't matter how low you are. It doesn't matter how many bad decisions you've made. It doesn't matter how many men you've slept with. It doesn't matter how many out-of-wedlock kids you've had. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That God can pick you up out of the complete mud. You can be drowning in it. God can pick you up, and he can clean you off, and he can set you on your feet, and he can give you a little bit of confidence every day, a little bit of truth every day, to quiet the lies, to have you realize, oh, I'm his child. The way I look at my kids, like, he looks at me like that. And, like, I get emotional still, like, I love my kids. There's nothing my kids could do to make me not love them. So to think that God looks at me like that, that God looks at me and says, you've made a real mess, and you're going to clean it up because you made it. But I'm here for you. When you're ready, I'm here for you. And I don't know what it was blocking me. It was Satan. It was the lies. It was just me refusing to come out of the dark. But there was a moment towards the end of my last marriage where I lived in a closet. I moved my bed and what little belongings I thought I needed into a cedar closet. It's probably 8 by 8. And it was an attachment to one of my kids' bedrooms, and I lived in it. And I wrote prayers all over the walls. I wrote scriptures all over the walls, and I was just doing everything I could to block Satan out, because my head was so loud.
Yes.
My voice in my own head and Satan's voice in my head was so loud that I couldn't even come out of the closet.
How did you overcome that? What would you say?
Well, like you said, the people in my life, the people that God has allowed to stay in my life, and I had to do some pruning. I had to cut out the people who were fueling the lies, which was hard. Because even though it was a bad connection, it was still a connection.
Yes.
So cutting them out was hard. But once I got down to the core people who were really for me, who God had placed there to pray for me, to cover me, they would offer to bring meals. They would offer to take my kids. They would show up at my house, like even when I sometimes didn't want them to. Like they were relentless in loving me. And I really feel like now it was God's physical representation saying, I'm not going to leave you.
Yes.
You're not alone like you think you are. You're in the closet physically, but mentally, like, you're in the closet because you're keeping yourself there. You don't have to be in the closet. And that moment of coming out, and I remember very clearly when the relationship had finally dissolved and he moved out of the house, and I had a group of women over to pray through the house. And it was the most real form of spiritual warfare I've ever witnessed. I've seen people battle spiritually. I've seen people, falling out at the altar. And I've witnessed things like this, but in my own life, where it pertained to me and my home and my kids,
So much different.
it was, I think it really took me a couple of years to really digest what happened in that house that day. But things felt different from that point on. There was this level of lightness and peace and no walking on eggshells. The anxiety was gone. And there was just this, like, laughter started happening again. And joy started happening again.
Praise the Lord.
And games started happening
Isn't
again.
that what he promises
And it was
us?
like, how have I been living in this dark for so long? But really, I think my story wouldn't mean as much without the dark. My story wouldn't mean as much without the mistakes. My story wouldn't mean as much because if it was, when you first asked me to do this, you said, I want you to speak on resilience. And I had this, like, really negative adverse reaction because in my mind, resilience was, oh, look what I did. Look at me. Look how I bounced back. Look how I can overcome. And it was like, that doesn't sit right with me. And I talked it over with some friends, and I was like, and they were like, Kara, the Bible's full of resilient people.
That's right.
And I was like, okay, I just need to do some more digging. I'm very, I like to study. I like information. So I started researching, and I found every definition I could for resilience. And then I found every example I could for resilience. And then I started going through the Bible and, like, naming names, and I'm going to study this person. I'm going to study this person. And I started realizing that resilience isn't about me.
That's right.
Resilience is about what God does with my life, despite what I do with my life. And how he will never let me go. He will never let me fall so far down.
That's right.
Into the depths, into the dark, that he can't pull me back out. And so, like, when you said that rubber band, that was so, like, picturesque for me, because that's how it felt.
Yes.
It really felt like I'm trying to get away, and then the rubber band would get too tight, and he would snap me back. Like, nope, you're not going anywhere. I have plans for you.
That's right.
And it's been incredible. It's been this church has just been a place of true healing for me, healing for my kids. I've seen each one of my kids, with the exception of the baby, step up and volunteer to be baptized and desire to be baptized and understand what that means. That it's just this proclamation, this step that they're taking, saying that I believe in God and I want to live for him. And, like, oh my gosh. Awesome. If you'd have told me that my children, and the first child that did this, I think he was, 6 years ago, he would have been maybe the tail end of middle school, stepped up and did it. And then right behind him was my daughter, who was like, I want to do it too. And then just this past year, my 8-year-old, was really adamant about it. And he's on spectrum, so I was hesitant with him because I really wanted to make sure he understood what he was stepping into. And so the first round of baptisms, I was like, because he said it right as people were getting baptized. I was like, let's go home and talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's walk through this and make sure that you understand what that is. And then the next round of baptisms, he had kind of, like, stopped talking about it, and I had kind of forgotten about it. And then he told his Sunday school teacher, I'm being baptized today. And they came and got me. I had been leading worship. They came and got me. They said, Quentin says he's being baptized today. And I went, oh my gosh. He remembered. He meant it. And he did. He walked out there and he looked the pastor right in the face and he got teary-eyed when he said his answers. And I was just, it was just this beautiful moment that I know that if I hadn't been obedient, if I hadn't said yes, if I hadn't
That's right.
agreed to what God was asking me to do, not that those moments would have never happened, but they wouldn't have happened this year. And God's he's doing amazing things, and the ministry continues to grow. The church has grown tremendously, and I feel very passionately about the mission and the vision that our pastor is intentional to set. And it's apparent that there are other people just searching for this place to be
That is-
themselves to
that is
heal,
so
to
true. That is so
to
very,
walk
very
in and
true.
say, I don't have it all together. I might never have it all together.
And it's okay.
And that is truthfully humanity, right?
It
Like
is.
we're never going to be clean until he comes back and brings heaven here on earth, and we see this new
Yes.
life that he has for us. But for now,
Well, I want everyone to just look at this face over here. You've probably noticed that the entire time she's been talking, there's just been this broad smile. That is what we hope you understand.
Yes.
Is that when you feel like life is pushing you down, there is a way out. It takes work. It took a lot of work for Kara to get where she is today, and she's still growing. I'm also still growing, and you can tell by my gray hair that I'm not as young as she is. So what I hope is, Jen and I love to talk about this. We talked about it recently too. You know, it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, what you've done or where you've been. This is a temporary place for us, this world. And so the journey continues. My journey will continue. There's so much more to learn about who I am, mostly through the eyes of Jesus. How does he see me? Because what you've described is he's always seen you.
yes.
So we're very grateful that you wanted to come and share this story with us today.
And I think it's important, like it is about how Jesus sees us and our mission of taking that and bringing that to these relationships.
Yes.
How does Jesus see you is how I need to see you. How does Jesus see you is how I need to see you. And our call is to love.
That's right.
So I just I'm grateful to be in a place where I have the brain space, right? Like I'm in school. I have the honor of teaching and pouring into young people now, musically, but also relationally. And none of that would have been possible if he hadn't
So what's
picked
next?
me up and washed me off. Gosh, more worship leading. I feel very passionate about it. I am currently in a degree program for ministry leadership.
Awesome.
Next up is I have an instrument. It's my voice. But next is learning an instrument, maybe a worship design school or worship arts school. Not because I feel like it's required, but now that I am passionate about it and I am being intentional to step into this calling, I want to be equipped. I want to feel educated. I want to feel like I'm prepared for as many situations as I can be, to be a positive impact. And yeah, I've been teaching some gospel choir to some high schoolers, so that's been very a very cool experience. And to see already that they recognize that I am a safe place, that they're going to hear truth from me. They bring information to me and ask me questions that have nothing to do with gospel music, so I know they trust me. And so just hopefully more growth in those areas. I would love to see I would love to see events where worship leaders come together, churches come together, and put on 24-hour worship events. Or I would love to see a gospel choir that encompasses all ages. I have big visions that I think God has given me, so who knows when they will come to fruition, but I do believe that if I just continue to say yes and continue to love and continue to worship, that he'll do the rest.
That's right.
Well, you have some big voices on that team too, though.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
I went to that night of worship
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
guys had, and man, you have a couple. And I think one of the women who I thought was the powerhouse, she was also at that night struggling with her voice. And even during the middle of the song, her husband was bringing her water, and in between like her part, she was taking the water, and I felt so bad for her. But man, she really brought it.
Yeah, she's an incredible singer. She's actually Pastor Christine, who you're referencing, is she is on staff also pastoring Relevant Niles. So we have a couple locations.
Oh,
yeah,
that's wonderful.
so there's one in Niles, Michigan. There's one in Grand Rapids, and who knows what the
Where
future
we
holds,
go
where
from
else
there.
they will go. But we're meeting inside the Potter's House High School on 28th Street. If anybody wants to join us, we currently have 2 services, so 9 and 11. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram, The Midst of My Joy,
Love it.
which is just hopefully a place that encourages other people to have joy too. So.
Yes.
Awesome.
Well, good.
You want to lead us out?
Certainly. I don't know what else to say, Kara, but thank you, Kara Cole, as she mentioned, Relevant Church. You can see her there. I pray that you would be encouraged by all that she has shared today. I know I am when I heard her story. So we're grateful that you've taken the time to listen, and we pray that you're encouraged in all that you do. Yes. So thank you for tuning in. Remember that you can find us on YouTube, Facebook. You can catch us on our website at www.sparklightministry.com. I think I said that wrong, but you all know what I mean. And we really are about, as you can see, I'm wearing my flame today. We want you to go out and go set the world on fire with the love of Jesus Christ.
Amen.